So, welcome to part two. We had just talked a little bit about how Caesar had defeated Pompey in his ambition, wanting to really take over rule in Rome. And Pompey, who was a popular military commander, had conquered Israel with Jerusalem, capturing Jerusalem in BC 63. And Caesar crossed the Rubicon River into Italy, which was against the law. And so Caesar broke the law, but here's the strange thing. Everyone, all the common people loved it because they liked Caesar. They had learned about him. He was famous. He had conquered Gaul for the Romans and had written this great book, Commentaries on the Gallic Wars. So he was well known and beloved. They thought he was great, that he loved Rome. They looked forward to his rule. So even when he breaks the law and marches an army into Rome, they're not upset with him. Now the Senate was worried, but the common people accepted him. They were looking forward. So he was very popular. Let's just make note of that Caesar had great popularity with the common people. And these people were known as the Plebs, and that was the short for the plebeians. The plebeians. The plebeians are the commoners. These are the people who are not famous families. They are the common people. So Caesar had great popularity. Now, where he lacked his popularity, he lacked popularity with the Patricians. And the Patricians were the famous families, Brutus, Cassius, Antony, others that their families, Sulla, they go Crassus. They go way back in Roman history. So I'm going to put down Patricians. Patricians are these, I'm misspelling it here, and Patricians were the first families of Rome. So you have the plebeians and the patricians. So those are two good words to know. The plebeians, the common people, the patricians, the first families of Rome. The older families, the well-established families, tended to be wealthy. Okay? Now, Caesar ruled with great efficiency as a consul. So he was very efficient, kind of like as a general would be very efficient, making sure his troops got what they needed. Caesar was that way with the common people. He was efficient, and he was also very popular because he paid the debts. He paid their debts. So lots of people were, like today, lots of people were in debt. He was popular. He was paying their debts with public money. And that was great. It wasn't even their own money that he was spending. He was making money. And you can imagine, as we know today, that will break down a country after a time. But very popular. Okay, he financed large celebrations. So he paid for and financed these big celebrations. So these would have lots of food, lots of entertainment, lots of drink. Okay? It's like maybe in America, if we had someone who would just give lots of free stuff to people and feed them well, so there would be probably a great number of particularly poor people who would really like that. Okay? He provided work projects. So he got big public work projects, bridge building, aqueducts that carried water, big buildings that were, of course, put people to work. So he's providing projects. And then he created another thing. He created the Julian Calendar. Now, he named it after himself, Julian. That was pretty humble of him, don't you agree? To name the calendar after himself. This calendar had 365 and 1/4 days per year. So this was the calendar that made allowance for that extra quarter day, and that made it so that the calendar was very stable. He ruled Rome from 49 BC to 44 BC. So just for 5 years. And then the Senate got to the point where they saw that he had become so powerful, and the Senate was worried. They perceived that he was going to destroy the Roman Republic, and that he was bent on putting himself in as the first empire. So, what did they do? Et tu, Brute, then fall, Caesar. Yes, they killed him. So he was assassinated. And, of course, we don't know that Et tu, Brute was the last words that he said, but they assassinated him on March, what? The Ides of March. March 15th, BC 44. 44 BC, on the Ides of March. So as we think about this, and you know how Shakespeare has had that great play, maybe one of his most famous, maybe the most famous history plays that Shakespeare wrote. Let's think of a couple questions. One, I think as we think of discussion about this, could you discuss this idea? Why were the people of Rome willing to trade away their liberty for someone like Caesar, someone who would bring efficiency and economic opportunities? People were working, they were building projects, they had that. So that's one question. Why were they willing to trade that away? Is that true of today? Would people today be willing to trade away liberty for efficiency? A second question we might think of is, when we think about this discontent, the people were obviously very unhappy, and there was a lot of strife, and there was discontent and strife within the Republic. How did that lead to the rise of a dictator? Let's think about that for just a moment. Okay, let's think of question one. Let's kind of review that. Why were they willing to trade away their liberty? For efficiency and economic advantage. Why were they willing to do that? Well, I think you've probably thought of a couple things, and I can't really ask you personally about that, but probably you were thinking, well, it was pretty chaotic. And you're right, it was chaotic. People had high unemployment. slaves were doing a lot of the work. There was a lot of slavery with all of these enslaved people that the Romans had conquered. And so there was a frustration. People were, they saw a lot of waste, they saw a lot of inefficiency, and it just caused a lot of chaos. They didn't know where their country was going, and they were willing to restore order. And we see that often in history, that when there's chaos, that people are often willing to trade away their liberty because they want to have order. They want to have safety in their cities. And so the Romans were much like that. They had reached a point where that was true, and they embraced someone who said they would give order. Pompey, Caesar, whoever it was appealing because he was helping them with what they were most worried about, and that was lack of order, lack of safety. So we come to the second question. How did discontent and strife within the Republic lead to the rise of dictators? So now we have, as we enter next week, we're going to be talking a lot about the emperors of Rome. And how did the people put up with these emperors? You're reading in your book, and you see how selfish and how greedy and how we would say profligate or immoral these emperors were. How did people put up with that? And once you get a dictator, we don't have one in our country. It's hard for us to imagine because we have not experienced that. But once you have a dictator, there are people in the culture who want power, and there's always power-hungry people who are in the culture, and they're willing to even kill people to have power. And you see that through history, but you see it that in our country, we, some of these power-hungry people become politicians, and they have to get elected. So they have to make agreements with the people. They have to compromise to be elected, and then they're under a constitution. So they're limited in what they can do. And if they start to do something that's more powerful than what the Constitution allows, they can be removed from office. We call that impeachment. And so we see that our Constitution helps to keep power-hungry people from taking over. But you can see all through history we have these power-hungry people. I think in modern period we had Adolf Hitler. Hitler wanted, I think he was a power-hungry man. He took over Germany and then just very satisfied and self-fulfilled that he saw that he could control everybody. He could even send people to prison. He could even put people to death, as he did the Jews in the gas chambers. He could order armies to attack Russia. He could try to develop an atomic bomb, which he tried to do. He developed a jet airplane, which he did. He was successful, the first jet. And so, these power-hungry people are very satisfied. And some of them are very deceived. They think that they're actually doing things for their nation, when in reality they are doing things for themselves. So I think all of this teaches us that when you see discontent and strife in a city or a nation, that can lead to the rise of a dictator, someone who promises that they'll solve the problems, they'll give the people things they want, food, entertainment, all kinds of public projects so they can become popular. And usually you see popularity is a dangerous thing. In some ways, it's wonderful to have a popular president or a popular senator or governor. But in some other ways, that can really easily go to their head, can't it? You think of how easily deceived we are because we're sinners. So the Bible, I think, has the answer to that. And the Bible teaches us that, without humility, without following the Lord, we can see bad things happen, even in our own lives. There's a passage in the Old Testament where God says through a prophet, he says, "He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of thee, but to do mercy, to love justice, and to walk humbly with your God." To do mercy, to love justice, and to walk humbly with your God. And so Jesus taught we must love our neighbor as ourselves. We must empty ourselves, become servants, love God more than we love things, love God more than we love anything. And so, God working in our life can help us not fall prey to some of these ideas. But we would be wise to notice, and we learn this in history, that people are often power hungry and they want to be popular so they can have more power. Well, some big lessons there that we learned from Caesar. Next week, we get to learn more about the empire. So God bless you as we study together. Thank you.